So, if you have been wondering about how you can um, recover or renew your sense of aliveness, um, your the power of your presence, ability to live with a deeper sense of purpose, and to have more clarity, feeling of connection, and resilience to support the path of your for your life and also for the work that you're here to contribute. Um, in the midst of all of the daily information we see, and the world also maybe feeling like it's going through a lot of upheavals, it's easy to experience or feel overwhelmed, maybe uncertain about how to move forward, or disconnected when our attention is pulled in distraction in multiple directions. So it's helpful though to notice because of what might be happening, because the quality of our attention and our presence shapes much of the experience of life, as well as our work and our relationships. Um, and I've been noticing personally how much in the midst of what might feel like chaos, or when we're not clear or centered, that um, my mind can attempt to manage everything and figure things out in a way that creates exhaustion, especially when combined with patterns of perfectionism, overthinking, or control. These can actually be forms of control without actually realizing it. So, anyways, there can be many different symptoms and things that we experience in our life um, as habitual ways of being that might have served us to sort of stay protected, to manage, get to where we are now. Yet, um, if you are being asked or sensed in a way from internally, like a sense of a calling to step into a new way of being, to grow beyond, um, gently, to stretch beyond your comfort zone, um, and maybe really longing to co create life and work in a way uh, that feels aligned with who you are. Um, it can be in ways it's sort of like we're maybe being asked then to find a way to co create life from the inside out. Many times and myself included in this, even today, um, there are ways that I notice my attention got very pulled into outside things, like paying attention to every little thing, for example, that people might be saying to us. Um, and then um, uh, that becomes part of the distraction as well. Like if you're if we are, and many of us sort of have lived this way, where our attention is always outside of us on everything happening around us, um, then we may not notice the subtler signals of reactivity when it's beginning. And we also then feel more disconnected from our inner guidance, sense of aliveness, and so many other qualities that are actually available here and now when we um, learn to tune in. But it's really important. One of the things I especially wanted to share in this video is to understand that that it is there are different ways that we can learn to open our perception and to drop into this place of more embodied presence, or the feeling of it can also be even while we're sort of dropping in, it can also be an experience of expanding into a sense of interconnection with the world around us, but from a sort of calmer, centered place. And there are different ways that we can find our doorway into that state. There's not only one doorway, and this is helpful also because if you're someone who has struggled with sitting in meditation, like sitting quietly, and found that your mind was really noisy or that you couldn't sit still, it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you, but rather that there's maybe your system for different reasons may not be ready yet to settle in that way. And yet there are other ways you can find a doorway into a feeling of calmer, quieter internal presence. There are multiple ways that you can find that access to that. And it doesn't mean that some of the other doorways may not also be open for you along the way, different times, but it can be helpful to explore what works for you. And this is also so important. So this is again, all of this is to support you in cultivating more awareness and focus, or being able to be present with attention in the moment. This is helpful for many reasons. One is that when we're in that state, then often it supports our natural healing processes. It's more enjoyable. And also, we then start to develop the capacity to perhaps notice where old patterns are trying to surface and then not maybe falling into getting stuck in them. But that's difficult if instead we are caught up in more automatic ways of being. And I know this from having experienced times in my life also where I developed through consistent practice more of that capacity to maintain the gap between a trigger and where a reaction would start. And then there are other times in life where that gap that I had created started to, where I lost that capacity for awareness from not maintaining consistent practice. So it's so important, especially because sometimes there may be challenges we encounter along our way that we don't expect we will experience. And especially if multiple things stack up, one after the other, gradually over time in chronic stress as well, it can start to erode if we aren't maintaining practice. What I experienced is that it can start to erode that capacity. So these are very important foundational preliminary practices when we have that longing and the intention to awaken, to embody more of who we are. And understanding ourselves, understanding our inner system, and especially again how to find these doorways into presence in a grounded way is also helpful for healing and regaining our sense of aliveness, as well as ability to listen to inner guidance. And another thing to mention is that sometimes we may not realize we're in habitual reactive patterns because they don't always look like emotional upset. Other types of what we could put all together in under the label of reactivity can also look like disconnection or shutdown, where we're living in a way that life feels sort of flat, or we might say that we're fine, but things are actually sort of suppressed or kind of disconnected in some way beneath the surface. Or we might be more living in our head and even over functioning in a way of like a lot of effort that eventually can be leading to burnout. And these are also examples of sort of habitual reactive patterns that we may not realize that we're running in. So when I'm saying reactivity, it's not only in the sense of emotional upset like anger or obvious or grief that maybe seems to keep happening again and again. It can be other, there can be other forms. So wherever you may find yourself anyways, it's not about judging what our current experience is. And instead, again, to develop these ways to become more curious, to help more quickly start to settle or recenter ourselves. So awareness practices in different approaches to awareness, again, are very helpful. So I'll share a few simple ways now that you can return to center to help shift perception, to support whatever it is that you're wanting to create in your work and your life with purpose, in living with purpose. So so there are ways, again, that you have already likely experienced these states of more heightened awareness. Excuse me, hiccuping. Or where you felt sort of present and awake, or sort of enlivened or expanded in some way, while also feeling like you were, sometimes there can be a sense of freedom as well, a sense of freedom to be yourself. And we all have had these types of experiences. And you can also think of these doorways as sort of like doorways into deeper listening, or where our system starts to operate in a more coherent way. Many times when we're experiencing internal conflict or reactivity or struggling in our daily life, including maybe difficulty thinking clearly, while there may be, it's not to say that it doesn't mean there aren't perhaps external things that are challenging that are happening. But if we are also internally in our inner system, not in a coherent place where our nervous system is more regulated, and also from an energetic perspective where the magnetic field that's generated by our heart, and the smaller field from our brain, but where those are not synced up, there's also sort of the body center as well, lower down. Um, so if um, if we find ways to drop in and listen more through the heart, um, or to bring sort of more alignment between body, heart, and mind, um, then this can also support our system. Um, so even myself in the moment right now, I'm finding that my mind is a little bit foggy, and some overthinking is happening. So rather than talking more about this, let's actually begin by exploring the first possible doorways. Well, maybe I should just mention them first. So there's um, observation of experience, and I'll explain each of these just briefly, but then guide one at a time in simple practices to see if there's any for you that really you feel a sense of that it works for you. And there may be more than one as well. Even on different days, it's helpful to know about these because sometimes on different days you might find that one doorway opens, and maybe on other days it'll be another doorway that's needed. So it can be helpful to explore each of these, even if you think that you know which for you already it is. I encourage you to try these practices with me. Um, and again, all with the intention of being able to listen more within ourselves, with cultivating subtle awareness and reconnecting to the essence of who we are. Um, okay, so actually, before we even begin any of these practices, I often, for myself personally, find it helpful to pause and sort of, in a way, dedicate or ask for sort of like with intention that I'm opening or asking in a way to inner guidance, to the sort of the like we all have within us a self that is already um, that already has qualities of clarity. Um, it's like an inner guiding intelligence um, that is beyond the surface level thinking mind. Um, but we can set an intention for any practices that we explore or engage with to become more receptive to this sort of wisdom of deeper wisdom of life that's within you, but that is also connected to all of life. So, however you may think of that, but sort of with from a stance of surrendering to maybe that as much as I may have tendencies to overthink, that my surface level mind like that is a not often uh, an accurate guide, um, and that I can intentionally open to practice from a place of exploring in a deeper way, or remembering in a deeper way. Um, so that can be as simple as an intention to listen more with the heart rather than our thoughts alone. Um, and also, as we explore these practices, it can be helpful to to set aside any worry about needing to get things right and rather to adapt a perspective of the exploration, to enjoy the exploration. So to begin, the first doorway we can is one of observation. Um, this is like, actually, I don't know if you heard, but there was a plane that just went flying overhead. But it can be as a metaphor, sort of like letting things pass through, like clouds moving through the sky. Um, we can practice observing whatever experience is arising in the moment, whether thoughts, sensations, or sounds, um, without sort of attaching or grabbing on or holding them the same way that we might normally. And so one of the practices for this is something from, sorry, I'm forgetting now the exact name, but it's a practice of sort of connecting with the unified field through uh, systematically bringing attention to uh, the senses of um, seeing, hearing, and feeling, um, but in a way where another, sorry, now there's a helicopter. Oh, so that's a perfect example. So there's a sound. So right now, so I said, oh, there's a helicopter. And internally, I had a slight reaction of, oh, there's an interruption again in trying to make this video, which happens especially sometimes when we're outside. So there can be a lot of noises inside. Um, this practice of observation, of sort of connecting to the unified field through bringing attention to our senses, but in a way of noticing what we are sensing, but without labeling whatever is happening. Um, so we can, it's a way to start to uh, reconnect with ourselves as being that observer of the field, within the field, whatever is happening. Um, with curiosity and not with judgment or labeling. So, for example, sound is happening outside, and so to say quietly to ourselves, hearing, and then we can practice also with seeing and also with feeling, and we can practice both hearing what's outside and then also hearing or listening internally. And the same way with sight, outside and internally, and then feeling outside and internally. So let's practice that together. And before we begin, it also can be helpful sometimes just to notice feet on the floor and feeling your sense supported maybe by chair you're sitting in or the ground beneath you, and maybe in some way feeling the subtle aliveness in your body that's already here. And then So then first begin just simply bringing our attention to, so let's begin with seeing. So we can relax our gaze and just become curious and noticing what is around us. This can be noticing colors, maybe shapes, textures, as if you're seeing what is around you with new eyes. And rather than labeling anything that you're seeing, you're simply repeating to yourself, seeing, or see out, see out, see out. Because this is at the moment, the seeing is the method of observation that we're engaging with. You are the observer that is seeing. Sometimes when we look with new eyes like this, there can be even a feeling of appreciation, of joy, beauty of being alive. See out. Just aware that you are seeing. And then you can close your eyes and repeat in a similar way, seeing, but now within. So see in. And as you close your eyes, you can be looking within to see. For some people, there may be images that come to mind, whether clear or sometimes they may be more faint. And it's also okay if you don't see images. Just be curious, what is there? Maybe it is seeing emptiness in a way. See in. See in. See in. And then we can move to observation of hearing. So now we would say to ourselves quietly, hear out. I'm saying this out loud for the purpose of instruction, but you can just say it quietly to yourself. Hear out. And sort of like listening to sounds that may be close or maybe far away. Hear out. Whether there are loud noises, quiet noises. Maybe sounds of nature, sounds of the house where you were living. Other people's voices. But we're not labeling. So it doesn't matter what you're listening to. Sorry, we're not just mentioning possibilities, but we're not actually labeling. You're not labeling what you are hearing as an object. Instead, noticing that you are hearing out. So again, let's repeat. Hear out. Or if you prefer, you could say listen. Listening. And then similarly, we can listen or hear internally. If you'd like, you can close your eyes for this, but you can also keep them open, whatever you prefer. But hear in. Perhaps you might be hearing as you listen inside things like thoughts, like inner dialogue, or maybe some form of sound within your body. Hear in just with curiosity, hear in, hear in. And then finally, we can move to feeling. Um, so to feel out, we might feel the sensation of the temperature of the air around us. Maybe the sensation of clothing against your skin. Maybe the feeling of your feet on the floor or your chair beneath you, or standing if you were standing. Feel out. Feel out. Feel out. And then finally, feel in. Again, if you'd like, you can close your eyes, but quietly feeling the sensations internally. Maybe the warmth in your body, or the sensation of maybe tingling or subtle aliveness. Be like your heartbeat, or the feeling of pulse moving through your neck, or even your breath rising and falling. But without labeling whatever sensations you're noticing, and you are just repeating to yourself, feel in, being curious about what is here now. And not trying to change anything, saying to yourself, feel in. Feel in. And now that we've completed that um, exercise as a possible doorway, maybe noticing for yourself, how do you feel now compared to when before we started? Feeling more present, calmer in some way? Is there more clarity? And maybe also you can even let your attention just move in however naturally now where it wants to move to. Again, with just observation. Okay, so so that is the first doorway, and somewhat related to this doorway is another door that I have often found since as as a child. Um, that can be helpful as the doorway of appreciation of nature and the beauty of the natural world. So you could practice that observation process we went through, sitting outside somewhere, but even in a less structured way, by simply allowing yourself to sort of look at nature, anything within nature, not as a thing that you would label with your mind, but rather with softer eyes, as if you are meeting, not as if, because you actually are, you are meeting another living being, whether plants, trees, birds, and also the elements of nature, the sun, the sky, or the wind. Maybe there's water near where you are, or maybe um, sort of noticing the earth again around you. But so there's the elements of nature and the beauty of creation, and sort of observing, but in a way where we're sort of putting aside the mind that might label what we're seeing is, and instead um, bringing a quality of presence to whatever we are being with. So where I am right now, for example, trying to go around, I see wind moving, grasses in front of a hedge. But I'm not, when I'm observing with appreciation, I'm not saying to myself, oh, I see the wind moving in the grass. I'm just noticing the sort of beauty or appreciation of that movement, or noticing the sun on the leaves of the trees, or hearing the birds. There are many different ways that we might feel appreciation for nature. And even if you are in a city, still, if you can go to a window, you might be able to see the sky. Perhaps you have in your house a plant, something that you could be with. Maybe there are trees on your street outside or in a park nearby. If it's raining, you can appreciate all the cleansing and refreshing qualities of rain and how life-giving that is. But again, not needing to make any story about it, rather just remembering all the elements of Mother Earth which sustain our life as well as surround us. And that we are part, as an embodied being, we are part of this creation. And so the same way that you might look in nature at trees or flowers or rocks or anything, in a way that everything has its own way of being, its own way that it has grown. That it, in its own imperfect way, somehow there is a perfection in life around us that we might sense. And that also, that is true for you as well. You have your own beautiful design as part of creation, as you are right now, without needing to fix or change anything. So observation with appreciation of nature, which also, so of Mother Earth, which also includes your body as part of life, as part of Mother Earth, can help to expand our sense of reconnection, aliveness, as well as being more in the present moment. There's a way that beauty, when we look in this way, with sort of like the eyes of a child, with wonder or even awe at the natural world, there's a way that this moves the heart. It sometimes can help open the heart or expand our vision as well. That's personally one of my favorite doorways. And sometimes, if you have difficulty meditating when you're inside a house or a room, you could explore that. Maybe meditating outside would actually be easier. I remember actually experiencing that many years ago in India, and I was traveling in Oroville. It's like an intentional community, but they had a meditation center right in the center of Oroville that you could apply to go and meditate at certain time of the day. And for some reason in that space, I found I wasn't able to meditate. But when I went outside, there was a beautiful old banyan tree nearby, and there I was able to sit and felt a deeper sense of connection. So sometimes exploring, like again, whether it maybe outside is easier for you than being inside. And yet being outside can actually then open a doorway in, because it's the ultimate, the intention of all of this is to help you reconnect with your presence more in the moment, to open or increase your awareness and sense of clarity, and support your energy. So these are finding doorways to reconnect internally. Sometimes being in nature in sort of what we might think of as externally can help us to find this doorway within ourselves. I hope that was okay. Then another doorway is through somatic presence with the body, which I've already sort of mentioned in a way. Sorry, I'm noticing my battery on my computer is low, so I have to attend to that for a moment. Um, okay, so the next doorway that can help us to reconnect, the way that I had to reconnect the cord of my computer into a power source, can be through the body. So in reconnecting to sensations in the body, which the door of observation with the observation through the unified field and sensing exercise that we already practice is a way of reconnecting with the body, so it's kind of both of those doors together. However, it can also be as simple as instead of the practice of uh, repeating, hearing, seeing, etc. It can be as simple as just letting our attention drop into the body, um, with one um, uh, place for awareness to sort of land. Um, so it's like letting our attention drop out of the head, where we often are unknowingly sort of locating ourself, listening to our thoughts automatically, and instead feeling what is present within our body. So it might be like feeling the weight of you supported by the ground, like a sense of gravity that is connecting you to the earth. Um, and sorry, I had a little visitor coming by. Any of the sensations might be present. Noticing the breath, however naturally is moving, is another aspect of the body door. And so one place, for example, to observe the breath could be with the sensation of the breath at the base of your nostrils. Um, so you can notice, for example, maybe the sensation of the movement of your breath through your nostrils, the temperature of your breath as it flows in and out. And by allowing your attention to rest with your breath at the base of your nostrils, if you continue with that for a while, you'll start to find that your awareness increases, that you may notice, it may become easier to notice subtler sensations with the breath. So at the beginning, if it's helpful for you, you can also take a few more intentional breaths that are a little stronger to help sort of start to anchor in that feeling of sensation of the breath. And then as you let your breath just sort of naturally rise and fall, moving in and out in whatever rhythm it is moving at, not trying to change things, but you may start to be able to pay attention to subtler sensations. And whenever your attention, when you notice your attention has wandered off, then you can return it back to um, feeling that sensation of the breath at the base of your nostrils. Another place that you could notice awareness of your breathing would be through your chest or abdomen. Uh, so, and again, letting whatever is there to be there. Um, and another practice with the body can be noticing, as an example, the pulse of the heartbeat. So you can, if it's helpful, you can bring your hand to over your heart. See if you can feel that subtle pulse. And then you can also listen to different parts of your body for that pulse of your heartbeat moving through other places as your heart generates the flow of movement of blood through your body, with that sense of pulsing aliveness. So even, for example, at the tip of your nose. Or then to your ear. Feeling that in your hands. The soles of your feet. to your torso, your hands, your other ear, and back to your nose, even again, and then returning to your heart. So I was mentioning that much quicker than you could explore in a slower, guided, self-guided process of feeling that aliveness of the pulsations of the heart um, in different areas of your body. And also, again, this is something you can, it doesn't have to be sitting, you could be standing and also practice with body awareness, increasing your sense of presence, somatic felt sense of what's in the body. Um, so another doorway is doorway of sound. And this is rather than listening to sounds with observation as we were earlier, this is where you would quietly repeat a word, a phrase, or a sound that helps the busy mind to have something to focus on so that it stops the narrating that is often automatic and lets things start to settle. Um, and have you ever noticed that sometimes maybe at the end of the day as well, that the mind is loud and it won't stop talking, like just on its own. It might be complaining about things or repeating stories. Um, and if you've experienced sometimes that listening to music can be helpful, um, maybe then working with sound can be supportive for you. So some examples, for example, repeating a word or phrase would be like a mantra. Um, there are different um, traditions that work with um, sort of sacred um, sounds in repeating or chanting. Um, the simplest ones, for example, that you may be familiar with is the sound of Om. And you can begin with repeating it externally in the sense of verbal, like vocalizing it, where you hear it. But then you can also, after a few repetitions, you can repeat it internally, quietly. And there are actually, besides specific words, even without needing it to be in a language like Sanskrit or Hebrew or any tradition that you might be familiar with, indigenous languages if you're an indigenous person. Um, so there might be words or phrases or prayers as well from your tradition if you have a spiritual or cultural tradition that you follow. Um, but it can also be sounds um, such as the vowel sounds, which actually will resonate with different energy centers through our system. Um, and so, as I was beginning to say, the sound Om is one that is fairly well known um, and can be repeated while you're repeating it, also with attention, bringing attention to the sort of third eye area or the heart, but even just to repeat the sound itself if you're somewhere where you're in a public place, um, to help yourself return more into the moment. So it'd be, if you're by yourself, you could vocalize out uh, externally. So, oh, oh, oh. Um, and then you could repeat it internally quietly. So there's other sounds you may be hearing in the video because someone is doing some work outside with landscaping. So perhaps that's a signal for me to complete this video now, and I will make some other videos in the following days for other doorways, especially some of the ones some of my favorite ones also. One is with movement, um, of a way of listening with full-bodied awareness, um, but where we open the doors of the heart to listen to the field of energy that is both within us and around us, because really all of life is energy. Um, Within all matter is energy. And there are ways that we can learn to listen to the energy within our own system in different places, as well as um, the larger systems that we are connected to, including, of course, the ecosystem of Mother Earth. Our ancestral wisdom or roots, um, ways that we can reconnect through simple movements to, for example, some of the strength, some of the gifts that our ancestors carried, and even their remembrance of our essential nature and interconnectedness. Um, but with curiosity to experience what is here and now, what's arising. But in a way that we're standing and moving. And also through that practice, we can actually, with intention, directly connect to our center, to some of the essential qualities within us as archetypes, um, where we will naturally feel that sense of, it's sort of like merging with the um, dimension of our lives, or some of the songs within our life, of where we might feel more enlivened. Um, these are things that already reside within us. So I'll guide a practice for that another time, because of the external sounds that are happening here at the moment. And then also another doorway can be concentration in ways, and then finally also a doorway of allowing ourselves to really be absorbed in a craft or some form of work or ritual, but where we're in some way, even with house chores we might be working with, there are many ways we can work with things in the present moment, especially if it's a craft or an activity that you enjoy, even things like also running, some form of rhythm. Anyways, these are some other doorways that are possible. So I hope this is helpful. As an introduction to possible ways to explore, cultivating more awareness in the moment, and as doorways that can help you return more to center.